Never come back!
Please, no!
The night Lord Ashcombe threw his wife into the blizzard, she was 7 months with his child. Out, Lord Edmund said, and his hand was steady on the door. And do not let me see you on this estate again, madam. Not in this life. Lavinia did not beg. She pulled her thin shawl tighter over her belly, stepped past him into the snow, and walked into a wind that should have killed her by morning. 2 years later, the same door opened for her. She walked in on the arm of a man whose name made Lord Edmund's blood go cold, and she was wearing a coronet his title was not high enough to bow to. "My lord," she said softly, "I believe I left a child behind. I have come to collect him." So who is the man on her arm, and what title did Lavinia find in the snow that night? Who saved her? And why did they teach her to walk back into this house as someone he could no longer touch? And what has Lord Edmund been doing to her son in the 2 years she has been gone? If you want to watch a woman walk back into the house that cast her out and unmake the man who did it, hit that subscribe button right now, because chapter 1 is where the snow begins to fall. Lavinia had been Lady Ashcombe for 3 years on the morning the world began to end. She did not know yet that it was ending. She knew only that the wind off the moor had been wrong since dawn. The kind of wind her old nurse in Cornwall would have called a black wind, the kind that pushed at the windows of the long gallery, as if it were looking for a way in. She was at the breakfast table when she noticed it. She set down her teacup, the small Severus cup that had been her mother's, and she looked at the window for a long moment, and her hand went, without her telling it to the curve of her belly under the green wool of her morning dress. 7 months. She had counted again last night. 7 months and 4 days. The child moved when she set her cup down, as if it had felt her listening to the wind. "Hush, my own," she said softly, into the empty dining room. "Hush, my love. It is only the weather." The dining room was always empty at breakfast. Edmund did not come down before 11. He had not come down before 11 since their first month of marriage, when he had still made the effort to look at her over the toast. She had stopped being hurt by it in the 2nd year. There were larger hurts by then, and a woman could not afford to feel every one. She finished her tea. She set the napkin beside her plate the way her old nurse had taught her, folded once, never twice. She crossed the long gallery to the small sitting room on the south side of the house, the one room of Ashcombe Hall that had been allowed to be hers, and she sat down at the writing desk by the window to answer her steward's note about the lambing. It was a small thing, the steward's note. It was about a pen of ewes near the home farm and whether the new shepherd should be paid in coin or in kind. Edmund did not concern himself with the home farm. Edmund did not concern himself with anything that was not horses, or cards, or the long road to London. And so the small business of the estate had fallen, in the 2nd year, into Lavinia's hands. She had not asked for it. She had not refused it either. She had been a Cornish vicar's daughter before she had been Lady Ashcombe, and a Cornish vicar's daughter knows the difference between an ewe in lamb and an ewe gone barren. And the steward, an old patient man named Mr. Bullen, had begun in the 2nd autumn to come to the south sitting room with his ledger on Wednesday mornings instead of to her husband's study. Edmund had never noticed. That in the end had been the trouble. Edmund had not noticed a great many things. He had not noticed that the rents had risen by 1/4 in the last 18 months. He had not noticed that the south pasture, which had been weeping water for 10 years, had been drained at last in the spring on Lavinia's order, and was now carrying twice the head of sheep it had carried in his father's time. He had not noticed that the dairymaid had been replaced because she was cruel to the cows, or that the schoolmaster's pay had been raised, because the schoolmaster had been on the point of leaving for Bristol. He had noticed none of it. What he had noticed was that the new groom from London, the one his mother had sent down in the autumn, smiled at his young wife on the way to the stables in the mornings. The groom had been let go before Christmas. Lavinia had not protested. The groom had not, in fact, smiled at her. He had smiled at the dairymaid who carried the milk down the back path past the stable yard, and the milk had been put down on the step at the same hour. Lavinia walked to the home farm, and Edmund had seen one half of the picture and decided he had seen the whole. He had not asked her. He had only looked at her, across the dining table on a December evening, and he had said, very quietly, "You will not walk to the home farm on Tuesday mornings any longer, madam." She had not walked to the home farm on Tuesday mornings since. She had walked instead on Mondays. The steward had simply moved his hour. Mr. Bullen was a careful man. This morning was a Wednesday. The black wind was at the window. The note from Mr. Bullen was on the desk. Lavinia took up her pen, dipped it, and began to answer in her clear small hand. "Pay the new shepherd in coin." He has a wife in Bideford and a sick child, and the coin will travel where the kind will not. She had finished the note and was sanding the ink when the door of the south sitting room opened without a knock. It was Mrs. Quirk, the housekeeper. Mrs. Quirk had been at Ashcombe Hall for 41 years. She had nursed Edmund's father through his last illness, and she had laid out Edmund's mother on the marble slab in the chapel when her time came, and she did not knock at doors, because she had never, in 41 years, been required to. Lavinia set down the pen. "Mrs. Quirk, my lady." "What is it?" Mrs. Quirk did not come in. She stood in the doorway with her hands folded in front of her apron, and she looked at Lavinia for a long moment, and Lavinia understood, before the housekeeper spoke, that this was not about lambs. Mrs. Quirk had a particular look she wore when something was about to break inside the house. Lavinia had seen the look twice. Once on the morning Edmund's mother had been found dead in her bath. Once on the afternoon, Edmund had returned from London with a bruise around one eye and a debt of £19,000. The look was on Mrs. Quirk's face now. "His lordship has come down, my lady. At 10. At 10, my lady. He is in his study. He has had a letter. From town." Lavinia stood up. She did not stand quickly. She had stopped standing quickly when the child had grown large enough that quick standing made her dizzy. She rested one hand on the desk and steadied herself, and she said, very calmly, "Has he asked for me, Mrs. Quirk?" "He has asked for you, my lady. He has asked for you with a tone I do not like." "Thank you, Mrs. Quirk." The old woman did not move from the doorway. "My lady." "Yes, Mrs. Quirk. If your ladyship has time before going down to put a heavier shawl on, and to put the small box from your dressing table into the pocket of that shawl, your ladyship might find it useful by the afternoon. I do not say more than that. I am old, my lady, and old women have feelings, and a person with feelings does not always go to her husband's study, empty-handed, when the wind is sounding the way it is sounding today. That is all I have to say." Lavinia looked at her. Mrs. Quirk's eyes did not move from hers. The small box from the dressing table held three things: a miniature of Lavinia's mother, a folded paper with the direction of her father's old curate in Cornwall, who had become a vicar in Devon since her marriage, and to whom she could write if she ever had to write, and a thin gold chain that had been her mother's only good piece of jewelry. The chain Lavinia had been told, on the morning of her wedding, never to sell except in the last hour of need. "Thank you, Mrs. Quirk," Lavinia said quietly. "I will go up first." "Yes, my lady." The old woman bowed her head. She did not bow it deeply. Mrs. Quirk had never bowed deeply to anyone in her life, including the late Earl. But she bowed it, slightly, and she stepped back from the door, and as Lavinia passed her on the way to the staircase, the old woman reached out, very briefly, and laid one warm, dry hand against Lavinia's wrist. It was the first time Mrs. Quirk had touched her in 3 years. Lavinia went up the stair. She went into her bedroom. She put on the heavier shawl, the dark gray wool one her mother had woven for her in the last winter of her life. She took the small box from the dressing table and slid it into the inner pocket Mrs. Quirk had stitched for her in October, the pocket Edmund had never been told about. She stood for a moment at her own window and looked at the courtyard below, where the first snow was beginning to fall, thin and silvery and turning at the edges with the wrong color, the color the more wind brings when the wind is bringing more snow behind it than the eye can yet see. She put her hand on her belly. "Be quiet." "My own," she whispered. "Be very quiet. Whatever happens in the next hour, you are not to be frightened. Your mother is not frightened. Your mother is going down the stair." Then she went down the stair. She did not yet know on the third step that her husband had received a letter that morning from his mother's cousin in London, a man named Sir Mauritius Fane, and that the letter contained a piece of gossip Sir Mauritius had collected at a card table 2 nights before. She did not know that the gossip was untrue. She did not know that Edmund had been drinking since the letter had arrived, although it was not yet 11 o'clock. She knew only that the wind was at the window, and that her child was quiet under her hand, and that Mrs. Quirk had touched her wrist for the first time in 3 years. She crossed the long gallery to her husband's study, and she put her hand on the door, and she opened it. Edmund was at his desk. He was not sitting at it. He was leaning against the front of it in his shirt sleeves, with a glass in one hand and the open letter in the other. The fire in the study was high. The room was very warm. Lavinia, in her heavy gray shawl, felt the wrongness of the heat the moment she stepped through the door. It was the heat of a room that had been built up by a man who had been alone, with bad news for an hour. She closed the door behind her. She did not curtsy. She had not curtsied to him in his study since the 2nd year. "You sent for me," she said. He looked at her over the rim of the glass. He did not speak at once. He took a slow swallow of whatever was in the glass, set it down on the desk behind him, and folded the letter once, twice, into a small, precise square. He laid the square on the desk beside the glass. He looked at her again. "Lavinia," he said. "Edmund, I have had a letter this morning. Mrs. Quirk told me." "Mrs. Quirk," he said, "talks too much. Mrs. Quirk has been at Ashcombe Hall for 41 years, Edmund. She talks the amount she has earned. What is in the letter?" He smiled. It was a small, tight smile, the smile of a man who had been preparing a sentence for an hour and was about to find out whether it cut. "The letter," Edmund said, "is from my mother's cousin, Sir Mauritius Fane. You have met him in London the summer before last. I have met him. He smelled of brandy at 11 in the morning. I do not think well of him. Sir Mauritius writes from his club. He writes that on Monday evening last, at the card table of a Mrs. Carmody in Half Moon Street, the conversation turned to certain quiet rumors which have been traveling in town this autumn concerning a young lady from the West Country, a young lady married to a peer of small fortune, a young lady who has been delivered, the rumor suggests, of a child not yet born but already, in the opinion of certain persons, not her husband's." The wind moved at the window. Lavinia did not move at all. "Edmund," she said, "he names you, Lavinia. He does not name you in the letter, because he is too careful for that. He says the wife of a peer of small fortune in the West Country. He says a Cornish wife. He says a wife who walks to the home farm in the mornings. He could not have said it more plainly if he had written the name." "And whose child," Lavinia said very quietly, "does Sir Mauritius's card table suggest the child is?" Edmund picked up the glass again. "The schoolmaster's," he said, "from the village. A man named, I am told, Mr. Tregel's. A Cornishman like yourself, madam. A young man, unmarried. I believe you have raised his pay, on your own authority, twice in the last year." The room was so quiet she could hear the fire eating itself. She did not laugh. She wanted to. The laugh was very close to the surface, the laugh of a woman who has spent 3 years learning to hold a thing down, and who has been told, at last, exactly what shape the thing was that she was holding. Mr. Tregel's was 44 years old. He had a wife in the village called Eleanor, a quiet small woman with red hands and a love of long psalms, and 3 living children. And he had been Lavinia's father's pupil at the parish school in Cornwall a quarter of a century ago. He had wept, in the south sitting room, the day Lavinia had told him she had raised his pay, because his eldest boy was to go to grammar school in Exeter on the strength of it. And a man like Mr. Tregel's did not cry easily. She did not laugh. She held the laugh inside her teeth. "Edmund Ashcombe," she said, "you have been my husband for 3 years. You have read the letters that passed through this house. You have known Mr. Tregel's by name since our wedding day. You have stood beside him at the Christmas service for 3 Christmases. You have watched him put his coat over his wife when she was cold in the chapel. And you stand in this room now, with that letter in your hand, and you ask me whether the child I carry is his. I do not ask you, madam, I am informing you. Of what? Of what I have decided. The letter is 6 days old. By now it has been at 6 tables in town. By next Sunday it will be at 20. I will not have my name attached to such a thing, Lavinia. I will not have my heir come into this world under that question. The child cannot be born here. You cannot be confined here. You will leave Ashcombe this morning, madam, and you will not come back, and you will write to me, in due course, from wherever your father's people may consent to keep you, and we will arrange the matter between us privately. There will be no scandal. There will be no notices in the papers. There will be a wife in Cornwall who has gone home to her family for her confinement, and a husband who has been patient and good, and the child, when it is born, will be sent to my sister at Holcombe, who has wanted one for 8 years and asks no questions." She looked at him for a long moment. "You are taking the child. My sister is taking the child. You have not asked me whether the child is yours. I do not need to ask. You do, Edmund. You do need to ask, because the child is yours. The child is yours by every count of months and weeks and days, and you know it. You know it because you were here in May. You know it because you came to my room on the night of the Bideford hunt, and you stayed until morning, and you said a thing to me that night which you have not said since. You know it, Edmund. You have not been deceived. You have been used by your mother's cousin to do a thing he and your mother have wanted you to do, since the day you married a vicar's daughter with no fortune and no friends in town. You are doing it because it is easier than knowing yourself. That is all this is." The glass in his hand began to shake. He set it down again slowly. "You will leave," he said, "today, within the hour. In a blizzard, Edmund. It is not yet a blizzard, madam. It will be by noon. You have eyes. You have looked at the wind this morning the way I have. You know what is coming. You are sending me out into it anyway. You are sending your child out into it anyway. Look at me, Edmund. Look at my face. I am asking you, husband. I am asking you not as your wife, but as the woman who carries the only Ashcombe heir you are ever likely to have. Do not do this thing. Wait 1 week. Write to Sir Mauritius. Have him retract the rumor at the same 6 tables he started it at. He will do it for the price of a dinner. Wait 1 week, Edmund, and you will know yourself again, and you will be ashamed of this morning, and we will not speak of it again. He looked at her. For one long moment she thought she had him. She saw, behind the heat and the brandy and the letter, the small flicker of the boy he had been at 24, when he had come to Cornwall to settle a family matter and had stayed for 3 weeks, because the vicar's daughter had read him a passage of Cowper. One evening in her father's study, she saw the flicker. She watched it go out. You will leave, he said quietly, within the hour. I will not give you a carriage. A carriage would be remarked. You will walk to the Bideford Road. There will be a post-chaise at the crossroads at 1 o'clock. The fare to Exeter is paid. From Exeter you may write to whomever you please. You will not write to me. Do you understand me, madam? She put her hand on her belly. The child moved, once, hard, the way it had moved at the dining table when the wind first came up. I understand you, Lord Ashcombe, she said. She turned. She walked to the door of the study. She put her hand on the handle. She looked back at him over her shoulder, only once, and her face was very still. You will remember this morning, she said quietly. For the rest of your life, I will see to it. Then she opened the door, and she walked out into the long gallery, and Mrs. Quirk was waiting at the foot of the stair, with her own grey cloak already over her arm and a small bundle of bread and cheese tied in a napkin in her hand. My lady, the old housekeeper said, Mrs. Quirk, the schoolmaster's wife is at the kitchen door. Eleanor Tregel's, my lady. She has come up the back lane on foot. She does not know what has happened, but she has had a feeling since the wind turned, and she has brought a section shawl and a pair of her own boots for your ladyship, because your ladyship's boots are not what they should be for the road. She is waiting. Lavinia closed her eyes for one breath. She opened them. Then we go, she said, by the kitchen. Quickly, Mrs. Quirk, before he changes his mind only to make it worse. The kitchen door of Ashcombe Hall faced east. It opened onto a small stone yard, then a low gate, then the back lane that ran down past the home farm and out to the Bideford Road. Lavinia had walked it 100 times. She walked it now with Mrs. Quirk on one side and Eleanor Tregel's on the other, and the snow was already deep enough on the cobbles that her thin house boots filled with it before they had reached the gate. Eleanor stopped her at the gate. My lady, sit on the step, the cold one there. I will be quick. Lavinia sat. The stone was so cold it took her breath. Eleanor knelt in the snow in front of her, in her own black wool skirt, and pulled off Lavinia's wet house boots, and pushed her feet into a pair of stout dark leather boots that smelled faintly of the schoolmaster's small, dry leather shop. They fit. Eleanor had a sister Lavinia's size. Eleanor had thought of everything. There is wool in the toes, Eleanor said quietly. I put it there last night. I have had a turn since Sunday, my lady. I cannot say what kind of turn, only that I knew on Sunday after the service that I would be needed by Wednesday. So I prepared. The Lord sometimes gives a woman a turn, my lady, and a woman who has had 3 children learns to listen. There, stand. Lavinia stood. The boots were a miracle. The boots, for the first time in an hour, made her believe she would live to see noon. Eleanor pressed a small parcel into her hand. 2 pairs of stockings. Dry. Wear the first now under what you have. The second when those are wet through. Do not save them, my lady. Wet stockings will take the feet faster than the cold itself. Mrs. Quirk has the bread and cheese. I have one more thing. She took, from inside her own bodice, a folded square of paper. A letter, my lady, to my own cousin in Bideford, Mr. Penaluna. He keeps a small inn at the harbor. He has known me since we were children. He will give you a bed for the night and ask no questions. He will not turn you in. He has not loved Lord Ashcombe since the year of the press gang. You will know what to say. Go to him, not the post-chaise. Forgive me. Lord Ashcombe will have written ahead to the coachman by tomorrow. He will know you took the chaise to Exeter, and he will set men on the Exeter road. Do not go to Exeter, my lady. Go to Bideford. Stay one night with Mr. Penaluna. Then take the packet to Bristol on Friday morning, and from Bristol go where you will. He cannot follow you onto a ship he does not know the name of. Lavinia stared at her. Eleanor, my lady, you have planned this since Sunday. I have had a turn since Sunday, my lady, I told you. Eleanor, if he learns you help me, he will turn your husband off this estate. Your eldest is to go to grammar school in Exeter on Mr. Tregel's pay. He will lose all of it, the cottage, the school, the boy, everything. Eleanor looked at her steadily. My lady, she said, your father christened my first child. Your father read at my mother's burial. Your father lent my husband the money for his first books when no one in this county would lend a Cornish boy a penny. We have not forgotten. Cornwall does not forget, my lady. We will manage what comes. You walk. You catch the packet to Bristol on Friday. You write to no one in this county for a year. Do you understand me? I understand. Good. Now go. The wind is turning again. Mrs. Quirk, walk her to the bend in the lane. No farther. Come straight back. If his lordship asks for you, you have been in the still room counting the spirits. Do you hear me? I hear you, Eleanor Trejel. The two women looked at each other for one moment over Lavinia's shoulder. The old housekeeper of the great house and the schoolmaster's wife from the village, and Lavinia understood, in that one moment, that the two of them had spoken to each other before this morning, that perhaps they had spoken to each other on more than one Sunday, that perhaps the small, careful management of her 3 years at Ashcombe Hall had not been only her own. She did not say anything. She bent, awkward with her belly, and she kissed Eleanor Tregel's once on the cheek. Tell Mr. Tregel, she said, that his eldest is to go to grammar school in Exeter, whether or not the school here continues, and that I have left instructions with my father's old curate in Devon, a Mr. Branscombe, to receive a small sum from my mother's estate, each Michaelmas for the next 8 years for that purpose. The instructions are with the Bideford Bank under my mother's name, Polkinghorne, not Ashcombe. His lordship cannot reach them. Mr. Branscombe will write to you in March. Eleanor's eyes filled. My lady, you did this when? In October. I have had a turn too, Eleanor. Eleanor laughed. It was a short laugh broken in the middle. She caught it. Then go, Polkinghorne girl, she said. Go. The road is waiting. Lavinia turned. She walked through the gate with Mrs. Quirk at her side, and she did not look back at the kitchen door, because she had learned, in the last hour, that looking back at things that had hurt her only made them larger. They walked down the back lane in silence. The snow was coming down in earnest now, the silver of an hour ago gone, the wind shifting to a true blow. At the bend in the lane, where the hedge dropped low and the road to Bideford opened out across the fields, Mrs. Quirk stopped. My lady, Mrs. Quirk, I cannot come further. Eleanor was right, he will ask. I know. The old woman did not embrace her. She was not a woman who embraced. She reached, instead, inside her own apron, and she took out a small folded square of black silk, and she pressed it into Lavinia's gloved hand. My mother's prayer book, Mrs. Quirk said. It has been in my apron these 41 years. I do not need it any more. Put it in the pocket Mrs. Tregel's will have stitched for you when you reach the inn. It is small. It is not much. But it has the prayer my mother said on the road from Glasgow to this county in the famine year, my lady. And that prayer carried a young girl with nothing through 500 miles. It will carry you to Bideford. Lavinia's eyes filled. Mrs. Quirk. No, my lady. No words. Walk. Keep the wind on your left cheek the first 3 miles. When you come to the white stile at the elder tree, you bear right, not left. You will think the lane to the left is the road. It is not. It is a sheep track. It ends at a bog. Bear right at the elder tree. You will see the chimneys of the village of St. Bregwin in 20 minutes. Walk past the village. Do not go in. 3 miles past St. Bregwin the road forks. Take the left fork. The right goes to Hartland. The left goes to Bideford. 5 miles after the fork you will see the spire of Bideford Church. Mr. Penaluna's inn is on the 2nd street back from the harbor. It is called the 3 Anchors. Repeat it back to me, my lady. Left cheek into the wind. White stile at the elder, bear right. Past St. Bregwin. Do not enter. Left fork after 3 miles. Bideford spire after 5. The 3 Anchors. 2nd street back from the harbor. Good go. Lavinia went. She did not turn until she had walked half a mile, because she had told herself she would not. When she did turn, finally, on a small rise where the lane bent again, she looked back. Mrs. Quirk was no longer at the bend. The bend was empty. Only the snow and the hedge and the chimneys of Ashcombe Hall in the distance, already half hidden behind the falling white. She walked on. She walked for an hour. The wind was on her left cheek. The snow was getting deeper. The child was very quiet, the way it had been quiet at the dining table, and she was glad of the quietness, although a small thinking part of her began to wonder, in the 2nd hour, whether the quietness was a good thing or whether it was a thing she should be afraid of. She did not let herself be afraid. She walked. She passed the white stile at the elder tree and she bore right. The lane narrowed. The wind picked up. She passed within sight of the chimneys of St. Bregwin and she did not go in. She came to the fork in the road and she took the left. 3 miles past the fork, the snow turned into a true blizzard. She had thought she had known what a blizzard was. She had grown up in Cornwall. She had seen weather. She had not seen this. The wind dropped its voice from a wail to a roar, and the snow came at her sideways, and the hedge on her left disappeared, and the lane under her feet disappeared. And she stood in a white wall in a pair of borrowed boots, with one hand on her belly, and one hand against a thorn she could not see. And she understood, with a clarity she had not had even in Edmund's study, that she was going to die on the Bideford road. The child kicked. It was a single kick, not panicked, not weak, a single hard kick, the kick of a thing inside her that had its own opinion. Lavinia laughed. She did not mean to. The laugh came out into the wind, and the wind tore it away, and she leaned her forehead against the thorn she could not see, and she laughed again, the laugh she had not laughed in Edmund's study, the laugh of a woman who has been told, finally, the exact shape of the thing she is carrying. "All right, my own," she said into the wind. "All right, we are not going to die today. Your mother has been told, your mother is walking." She walked. She did not know then that there was a horse half a mile ahead of her on the same road, and a rider on the horse who had been turned back by the blizzard and had reined in. Beside the only shelter on that stretch of moor, a low stone barn used in summer by the St. Bregwin shepherds, and unused in winter by anyone. She did not know that the rider was a woman. She did not know that the woman was 64 years old, and had been in this county exactly 6 weeks, on business of her own, and that she had with her a groom, a small lantern, and a flask of brandy in the pocket of a coat made by her husband's tailor in Lisbon 8 years ago. She knew only that she was walking. She walked until her left cheek had stopped feeling the wind. She walked until her hand had stopped feeling the thorn. She walked until the only thing she could still feel was the child kicking, once, hard, every minute or so. The small, steady kick of a thing inside her that was keeping its mother awake. She walked into the lantern light before she had seen it. A voice said, in a deep, calm woman's voice she had never heard before, bring her in quickly. Bertram, the door. She is with child. Can you not see? Be gentle. Yes. There, child. Sit, lean against me, you are safe. Listen to my voice, you are safe. Lavinia leaned against the woman she could not see. The voice was English, but only just. There was something else under the English. Something foreign. Something that had been a long time in Portugal, perhaps. Something that had a different shape than any voice Lavinia had ever leaned against. What is your name, child? The voice said. Tell me your name. Stay awake, tell me your name. Lavinia tried. The first time no sound came out. The second time, very faintly, she said, Polkinghorne. Lavinia Polkinghorne. I am a vicar's daughter, from Cornwall. The lantern moved. The voice was quiet for a long moment. Then the voice said slowly, with something in it that had not been there before, Polkinghorne. From the parish of Tremorva. Lavinia, against the woman's shoulder, opened her eyes. How, she whispered, do you know my parish? The woman did not answer at once. She shifted her arm under Lavinia's shoulders, slowly, so that Lavinia's head could rest more easily against her, and she said, over her shoulder in a voice of perfect command, Bertram, the flask, and the saddle blanket from the bay. Quickly then the door. We are losing the heat. The groom moved. The door of the small stone barn shut. The wind outside became suddenly less. Only a low growl against the stones now, and Lavinia, in the half-dark, began to feel her face again. The pain came with the feeling. She set her teeth against it. The woman pressed the flask to her lips. Drink. Only a sip. Hold it on your tongue. Yes, there. Another. Good girl. The brandy was hot. Lavinia coughed. The woman did not let her cough long. She set the flask aside, took Lavinia's gloves off, one finger at a time, and began to rub the cold, dead hands between her own. Her hands were warm and brown and ringed. Lavinia saw, with the small, distant clarity of a person who is coming back into her own body, that one of the rings was a wedding ring of dark Spanish gold, and another was a heavy ring with a stone she did not recognize, the kind of stone that meant something in some other country. Tremorva, the woman said quietly, still rubbing the hands. I knew a Polkinghorne of Tremorva, a long time ago, a very young man. He was reading for orders. He came to my father's house in the summer of, it must have been the year 3. He was tutoring my younger brother in Greek. He used to walk to our gate at 6 in the morning across the fields, and he used to bring me a sprig of meadowsweet from a particular hedge halfway, because I had told him once that meadowsweet smelled to me of the south. He was kind, child. He had blue eyes the color of an iron pot. I have not thought of him in 40 years. Was that your father? Lavinia could not speak. She nodded against the woman's shoulder. The woman was quiet for a long moment. And your mother, she said. Helena Branscombe. She married him in the spring of 7. She died when I was 9. Helena Branscombe. Yes. The woman drew in a slow breath. Then your mother and I were second cousins, child, she said. Through the Branscombes of Wadebridge. My own mother was a Branscombe before she married. I have not been in Cornwall since I was a girl. And I have not been called by my Branscombe name in 40 years, but I am one of you. My name is Endelion Vo, once Endelion Branscombe, of Wadebridge. Drink another sip. We are going to know each other a great deal better in the next hour. But first we will get the cold out of your hands. She held the flask again. Lavinia drank. She drank slowly. The barn was small. There was no fire. But the woman had pulled the saddle blanket from her bay horse around Lavinia's shoulders. And Bertram the groom had built a small dry brick of stone in one corner and lit on top of it a small flame from a flat tin lantern with a long wick that Lavinia had never seen before. The flame was strange and steady. Bertram, she realized, was not a young man. He was a small wiry brown man with gray hair under a black cap, and the cap had a small silver pin on it she did not recognize either. She looked back at the woman. In the small flame light, Endelion Vo was not what Lavinia had expected from the voice. She was 64 perhaps, very upright, with iron gray hair pinned up in a heavy plain knot under a black traveling hat, and her face was a long brown face with a deep web of lines around the eyes that suggested a great many years of looking at very strong sun. Her coat was dark, plain, expensive, and cut by a tailor who had been good at his work the year he made it. There was no jewelry beyond the rings on her hands. There was no perfume. There was a faint smell of something Lavinia could not name. The smell of a small dry herb, perhaps, kept in a coat pocket through long travel. The woman did not press her with more questions. She waited. She waited until Lavinia had drunk half the flask. She waited until the color had come back into Lavinia's cheeks. She waited until the child in Lavinia's belly had kicked again, twice, in the small warmth of the saddle blanket. Only then, when Lavinia's eyes were open and her hands were her own again, did Endelion Vo say, very gently, "Now, child, tell me how you came to be on the Bidford Road in your house boots, in your condition, in a blizzard." Lavinia told her. She told her plainly. She did not soften any of it. She had not the strength to soften. She told her about Edmund and the letter, and Sir Mauritius Fane, and the schoolmaster, and the brandy, and the small, precise folded square of the letter on the desk. She told her about Mrs. Quirk at the foot of the stairs, and Eleanor Trigell's at the kitchen door. She told her about the boots and the stockings, and the prayer book in her pocket. She told her about the chimneys of Ashcombe Hall disappearing behind the falling white. She did not cry. She had still not cried. Although the brandy was loosening the place behind her eyes where the crying lived. She would cry. She knew that. But not yet. Not in front of a stranger. When she had finished, Endelion Vo sat very still on the small wooden stool Bertram had set out for her. Her hands were folded on her knee. Her face had not moved during the telling. Only the line at the corner of her mouth had gone deeper. She turned her head. "Bertram, my lady, how far is Bideford from this barn?" 5 miles, my lady. Less if the wind drops by morning. The road forks half a mile south. The left fork goes to Bideford. The right goes to Hartland. And the Three Anchors. Do you know it? I know it, my lady. Mr. Penaluna's Cornish family. The man's mother was a truant of Padstow. Honest house. Good. We go to the Three Anchors at first light. Not before. The wind will drop in the small hours. We will take Lady Ashcombe in the saddle in front of me. The bay can carry us both. You will lead. We will not stop until we are inside Mr. Penaluna's yard. From there I will arrange the rest myself. She turned back to Lavinia. "Child," she said, "I am going to say a thing to you now, and I want you to listen with what is left of your wits, because the brandy will take some of them in a few minutes, and we have only this hour. Will you listen?" "I will listen." "Good. You are not going to Bristol. You are not taking the packet. You are coming with me. I have a house in Lisbon, child. I have had it for 38 years. I have a husband there, although he is more dead than alive these last 2 winters, and will not last another summer. God love him. I have a daughter of 40 in Madrid with a great many children of her own, and I have a son of 37, who is unmarried and lives chiefly on a ship between Lisbon and the Brazils. I have, child, no granddaughter at home. I have always wished for one. I had not thought until an hour ago that the wish would be answered in a stone barn, on a road in Devon in a blizzard. But God is a humorous old gentleman, and one does not argue with him at 64. You will come home with me. You will be confined in my house in Lisbon. The child will be born there, in my own bed if necessary, with the best doctor in Portugal, whom I happen to keep on a small annuity for exactly this kind of occasion. You will live in my house as my own kinswoman, because you are my own kinswoman, and you will be Lady Ashcombe to no one in my house, child. You will be Lavinia Polkinghorne, of Tremorva, my cousin's daughter, until you are ready to be something else. Do you understand me?" Lavinia stared at her. "My lady, I have nothing. I have 10 pounds of my own money in the Bideford Bank in my mother's name. I cannot pay you a single thing for any of this. I did not ask for a single thing. I am not a tradeswoman, child. I am your mother's cousin. The rest is decided now. There is one more matter. Yes. Indelian Vo looked at her for a long moment in the small, steady flame light. You said, she said quietly, in your husband's study, that you would make him remember the morning for the rest of his life. Did you mean it? Lavinia did not look away. I meant it. Good. Then we begin now. She reached slowly into the inside of her coat. She took out a small, thin pocketbook, bound in dark red leather. She opened it. She took out a stub of pencil. She wrote, in a hand that was not English in its slope, 3 lines. She tore the page out. She folded it once. She held it out to Lavinia. This is the direction of my London man of business, a Mr. Hallowell of Lincoln's Inn. He has been my man for 30 years. He has handled larger matters than the matter of one small West Country peer with a brandy habit and a card, playing cousin. From the moment we walk out of Mr. Peneluna's yard, child, your situation is in his hands as well as mine. He will write this week to Sir Mauritius Fane. He will not threaten. He does not threaten. He will only inform Sir Mauritius that the rumor his card table circulated is known to be his work, that the lady concerned is the kinswoman of a particular family in Portugal, and that the family in Portugal would consider any further circulation of the rumor a private matter between themselves and Sir Mauritius personally. Sir Mauritius will fall silent within the week. He is not a brave man. Lavinia took the folded page in her gloved hand. And my husband, your husband, child, is a smaller matter than you fear. We will not touch him for 2 years. We will let him sit in his house with his brandy and his letter and his decision. We will let him discover, slowly, that no one in town will speak the rumor any longer. We will let him discover, slowly, that no one will tell him where you are. We will let him discover, slowly, that the small business of his estate, which you ran for him for 2 years, has begun to fail. And then, child, when you are ready, when the child is 2 years old and walks and speaks, you will go back, not before. You will go back with me on your arm, and a name on you that he cannot speak without bowing, and you will walk into that house, and you will collect your son or your daughter from whatever drawer he has filed it in, and you will let him understand, before the door closes behind you, exactly what was thrown out into the snow on a Wednesday morning in March. She paused. That is what I am offering you, child. 2 years of safety, and then a reckoning that you will not have to lift your own hand for. You will only have to walk. Do you accept it? Lavinia did not answer at once. She looked down at her belly. She put her hand on it. The child was quiet now, warm under the blanket, listening perhaps in the way children listen before they are born, to a voice older than its mother's. She thought of Eleanor Trejels in the snow with the boots. She thought of Mrs. Quirk in the prayer book. She thought of her father, with his iron-colored eyes, walking 5 miles at 6 in the morning across the fields with a sprig of meadowsweet for a Branscombe girl in Wadebridge in the summer of the year 3. She lifted her head. I accept it, she said. And Indelian Vo nodded once, the small precise nod of a woman who had been waiting 40 years to be of use to a Polkinghorn. Good, she said. Then sleep, child. Sleep against my shoulder. Bertram and I will keep the watch. At first light we ride. Lavinia closed her eyes. She slept, and 5 miles away, in the warm study of Ashcombe Hall, Lord Edmund Ashcombe was beginning very slowly to look at the window. 2 years passed. They passed in Lisbon. They passed in a tall yellow house on the Rua das Flores with a courtyard of orange trees. A small green parrot named Caetano, who had belonged to Indelian's husband, Sir Ruperto Vo, for 30 years. And a view from the upper terrace of the Tagus, moving slow and broad to the sea. They passed in the small low room at the back of the house where Lavinia was delivered, on the 3rd of May, of a son. They passed in the long warm summers when the boy christened Branscombe Polkinghorn in the English chapel, and called Bram by his mother from the day he was put in her arms, learned to walk on the cool tiles of the courtyard with the parrot on his shoulder. They passed in lessons. Indelian Vo, who had been a vicar's granddaughter from Wadebridge, and a merchant's daughter, and a captain's bride, and a port wine widow, and a Lisbon hostess, and who had been called, by the 2nd year of her widowhood, the Marquesa de Vo do Tejo by a Portuguese crown that had reasons of its own to ennoble the Englishwoman who had quietly financed 3 royal frigates during the bad year of 14, set herself in the first month of Lavinia's confinement to the project of remaking her. She did it without sentiment. She did it the way a clockmaker rebuilds a clock. Lavinia learned Portuguese. Lavinia learned Spanish. Lavinia learned the small, careful French of a Lisbon salon, which was not the French of a Cornish vicarage. Lavinia learned how to walk into a room of 40 strangers and find within 3 minutes the 2 people in it who mattered. Lavinia learned how to refuse a man without insulting him, and how to insult a man without raising her voice. Lavinia learned, from Endelian's own steward, the management of an estate of 14,000 acres, none of which were her own. Lavinia learned, from Endelian's own physician, what a healthy 2-year-old looked like, and what a sick one looked like, and the difference between a fever a mother could handle and a fever a mother could not. She learned, last, the matter of her own name. Sir Ruperto Vaux died in the September of the 2nd year. He died quietly, in his own bed, with the small green parrot on the bedpost and his wife's hand in his and Bram, 18 months old, asleep on his coverlet. He died in the calm, satisfied way of a man who had outlived his enemies and seen his last small wish granted. The last small wish had been Lavinia. He had, in the spring of that year, when he was still strong enough to write, asked her into his study. He had said to her, quite simply, "Child, I have no English granddaughter. My wife has waited 40 years for one. You are the answer to a question we had stopped asking. I should like, before I die, to give you my name not as a husband, as a grandfather. My wife and I have spoken. There is a thing in Portuguese law that can be done. The crown will allow it because the crown owes my wife 3 frigates. You would become, on paper, our adopted granddaughter, with a portion of our estate and a portion of our name. You would be, in the eyes of Portugal, Lavinia Vaux do Tejo, of the House of Vaux. You would also remain, in the eyes of England, Lady Ashcombe, until such time as you yourself chose to alter that. The two do not contradict. Will you let an old man do this thing?" Lavinia had been quiet for a long time in his study. She had been thinking not of Edmund, but of her own father, of his iron-colored eyes, of the sprig of meadowsweet, of the way he had said on the last evening of his life, "Lavinia, you are the only Polkinghorne I have left. Carry the name well. Do not let it be taken from you." She had said to Sir Ruperto, "I will accept the name on one condition. My son is to be Vaux du Tejo also. From the day the papers are signed, he is not to grow up under his father's name. He is to grow up under yours. If he chooses, when he is grown, to take back the Ashcombe name and the title with it, he may. But that choice is his, not his father's, and not mine." Sir Ruperto had smiled. He had said, "Granddaughter, I had hoped you would ask. The papers are already drawn." He had signed them on a Tuesday in May. He had died in September. He had left Lavinia, in the small dry codicil written in his own hand the week before his death, the use during her lifetime of a quinta in the hills above Sintra, an income of £4,000 English a year out of his Brazil trade, and the entirety of his English library, which Endelian knew he had been collecting for 60 years on the chance that some Polkinghorne or Branscombe would one day need it. He had also left her, by a separate paper deposited with Mr. Hallowell of Lincoln's Inn, the small dry instruction that she was, when she was ready, to be addressed in England under the courtesy title, which the Portuguese crown had quietly added to her adoption papers in May. She was in Portugal, the Marquesa do Vale do Cedro, the Marchioness of the Valley of the Cedar, a small old courtesy title that had been Sir Ruperto's mother's, hanging unused on his line for 50 years, and that the crown had been pleased, for the price of an evening's signature, to allow him to settle upon his granddaughter for her life. A marquiness, in England, ranked above a baron. Edmund was a baron. Lavinia did not write to him in those 2 years. She wrote to no one in England except Mr. Hallowell, and through him twice a year, to Mr. Branscombe in Devon, who handled the small annuity for Mr. Tregel's eldest, and to Mrs. Quirk and Eleanor Tregel's, who received, each Michaelmas by an untraceable route, a small package of Portuguese sugar and dried figs and a single sentence in Lavinia's own hand. The sentence was always the same. "I am well, the boy is well, we will come." Endelian read Mr. Hallowell's reports aloud to her in the evenings on the terrace above the Tagus. Edmund had not remarried. Edmund had tried, in the first autumn, to begin proceedings for the annulment of his marriage on grounds of desertion. Mr. Hallowell had quietly informed Edmund's London solicitor that any such proceedings would be met by the immediate publication, in 3 newspapers, of certain depositions taken from a Mrs. Quirk of Ashcombe Hall and a Mrs. Tregel's of the village school, concerning the events of a Wednesday morning in March of a certain year. The proceedings had been quietly dropped. Edmund had instead taken Lavinia's son. That part Lavinia had known would come. Bram was the heir. Edmund's sister at Holcombe had wanted a child for 8 years, but Edmund's sister had also, on quiet consideration, declined to take a child that the village said had been thrown into the snow with its mother in a blizzard. The child had stayed at Ashcombe Hall. He had been put in the care of a nurse called Mrs. Pengelly, a Cornish woman of 50, who had been hired in haste in the 3rd week after Lavinia's disappearance, and who had, by the end of the 1st month, written secretly to Mrs. Quirk offering to do whatever Mrs. Quirk required of her. Mrs. Quirk had required two things: that the child be loved, and that the child be remembered to whom it belonged. Mrs. Pengilly had done both. Lavinia's son, who in Portugal was a sturdy brown boy called Bram, who walked the courtyard with a green parrot on his shoulder, had at Ashcombe Hall a half-brother called by the village the Little Master. He was 18 months old by the September of Sir Ruperto's death. He was being raised by the careful management of Mrs. Quirk and Mrs. Pengilly and Eleanor Tragels and a great many small careful Cornish hands. The village would never name to Lord Ashcombe as a child who knew that he had a mother. He did not yet know her name. He knew only that her name began with L. He knew only that she would come. Edmund had not held him after the first month. Edmund had taken, in the second autumn, to long absences in London. The estate, as Endelion had foreseen, had begun to slip. The new shepherd had been paid in kind and had left for Bideford. The south pasture had begun to weep again. The schoolmaster's pay had been cut, and then, when Mr. Tragels had not flinched, restored, because the village had refused, very quietly, to send their children anywhere else. Edmund had not understood why. Edmund had not understood a great many things. In the March of the third year, on the second anniversary of the morning, Lavinia had walked out of his kitchen door. Endelion Vaux set down Mr. Hallowell's most recent letter on the small inlaid table on the terrace above the Tagus, and she looked at her granddaughter across the orange trees, and she said, "Child, yes, Avo, it is time." Lavinia looked at her for a long moment. She had known it would be time. She had been the one to set the 2 years. She had been the one to say, in the stone barn, that the child would walk and speak before she went back. The child walked. The child spoke. The child said mama in Portuguese and in English. And the child said Avo. And the child said Caetano to the green parrot. And the child was ready to travel. She was also, she discovered in herself with a small cold steadiness she had not had 2 years ago, ready to travel. Yes, she said, it is time. They sailed for England in April. They sailed on Sir Ruperto's own ship, the Santa Clara, with Bertram the groom, who had become in 2 years Bertram the major domo, and with Bram in a small white sailor suit on the lap of his Avo, and with Lavinia at the rail in a traveling dress the color of a Portuguese hill in winter, dark green wool cut by Endelion's own dressmaker in Lisbon, with no ornament at all except at her throat the small thin gold chain her mother had told her never to sell. She had not sold it. It hung now, in the April light of the Channel, against the dark green wool of a marchioness's traveling dress. They landed at Bristol on a Friday morning. Mr. Hallowell was on the quay, a thin grey man of 60 in a black coat, with a closed carriage and 4 horses and a man of his own on the box. Lavinia did not speak to him for long. She did not need to. The arrangements had been in place since February. They drove out of Bristol that same afternoon, and they spent the night at an inn outside Exeter. And the next morning at first light, they took the road south to Bideford. They stopped at the Three Anchors. Mr. Penaluna, who was 70 now and had not seen Lavinia in 2 years, came out into the yard with his cap in his hand, and he looked at the boy in the carriage, and he wept briefly, without apology, and he said, "Welcome home, your ladyship. We have been counting Wednesdays." They stayed at the Three Anchors only an hour. Eleanor Tragels came down from the village. She came in her Sunday wool. She did not weep. She had used her weeping in the first year. She knelt in the yard, in front of the carriage step, and she took Lavinia's gloved hand in both of her own red ones, and she said, "Polkinghorn girl, my eldest goes up to Cambridge in the autumn. Mr. Branscombe wrote to me at Michaelmas. There are no words I have for what you have done. There are only my hands. They are at your service for the rest of my life." Lavinia bent. She kissed Eleanor on the forehead. "Eleanor Tragels," she said, "you put me into boots in a blizzard. There are no thanks I can give you that are not too small. Take them anyway. They are everything." They drove on. They drove up the back lane to Ashcombe Hall in the early afternoon. The hedges were the same. The white stile at the elder tree was the same. The bend in the lane where Mrs. Quirk had stopped 2 years ago was the same. The chimneys of Ashcombe Hall rose ahead of them through the soft April green, smaller than Lavinia remembered, less terrible. Only chimneys, after all. She did not stop at the kitchen door. She had Bertram drive her round to the front, to the long gravel sweep, to the great front door under the stone portico with the small Ashcombe arms carved above. She stepped down from the carriage in her dark green dress with her mother's gold chain at her throat. Endelion stepped down behind her with Bram in her arms in his small white sailor suit. Bertram and Mr. Hallowell came down behind them. 2 footmen in dark green Portuguese livery, who had traveled with them from Lisbon, took up positions on either side of the carriage. Lavinia did not knock. She walked up the steps of the front door of Ashcombe Hall. and she put her gloved hand on the great brass handle, and she opened it herself. The hall inside was the same, the long stone flags, the two narrow tables, the portrait of Edmund's father in his hunting coat over the cold fireplace. Mrs. Quirk was at the foot of the stair. She had been at the foot of the stair, Lavinia understood, since first light, because Mrs. Quirk had received Mr. Hallowell's note on Monday, and had been on her feet at this position since Tuesday morning. She did not curtsy. She did not need to. She only inclined her head slightly, the way she had inclined it the morning. Lavinia had walked down the stair in the grey shawl, and she said, in a voice that was perfectly steady, "Welcome home, my lady. Mrs. Quirk. His lordship is in the study, my lady. He has been sent for. Mrs. Pengilly. On the upstairs landing, my lady. With the little master. The little master has been told this morning, by his nurse and by me, that his mother is coming home today. He has not been told her name. He has been told only that she has a green bird in her house in another country, and that she has been keeping the green bird safe for him, and that she has been carrying his name across the sea in her pocket these 2 years. He is ready, my lady, as ready as a child of 2 can be made." Lavinia closed her eyes for one breath. She opened them. "Mrs. Quirk, tell Mrs. Pengilly to bring him down. Not to the study here, to this hall. I will see my son before I see my husband. He has waited 2 years for me. His father can wait 20 minutes. Yes, my lady." Mrs. Quirk turned. She climbed the stair. Lavinia stood in the center of the long hall in her dark green dress. Endelion stood 3 paces behind her with Bram in her arms. Bram was looking, with the calm grave interest of a 2-year-old, at the portrait of his English grandfather over the cold fireplace. He had not seen so large a room in his life. He did not seem afraid of it. Mrs. Pengilly came down the stair with a small boy on her hip. The boy was sturdy. He had Lavinia's dark hair. He had, although Lavinia did not yet know it because she had not seen Edmund's face since his study, Edmund's straight Ashcombe nose. He was wearing a blue smock and small leather shoes that Mrs. Quirk had bought herself in Bideford the week before. He looked at Lavinia from Mrs. Pengilly's hip with the slow, steady gaze of a child who has been told a thing for a long time, and is at last deciding whether the thing is true. Lavinia walked to the foot of the stair. She held up her arms. She did not speak. She did not weep. She did not call him by his name. She had been told by Endelion that you do not call a child's name the first time you take him into your arms. After 2 years away, you let the child come to the arms. You let the child choose. The boy looked at her for a long time. He looked at Mrs. Pengilly. Mrs. Pengilly did not move. She did not nod. She did not speak. She had been told also by Endelion through Mr. Hallowell what to do. The boy looked back at Lavinia. He held out his arms. He said in a small, clear voice, "Mama." Lavinia took him. She took him slowly, the way Endelion had taken her in the stone barn 2 years ago, with no quick movement, with the careful gentleness of a person taking something that has been waiting. She pressed him against the dark green wool. She felt the small weight of him along her ribs, the warm small head fitting under her chin as if it had been measured for that place. She did not weep. She had used her weeping on the long road from Lisbon, in the small cabin of the Santa Clara, with Endelion on the chair beside her bunk, and Bram asleep against her shoulder. She had no weeping left for this moment. She had only the small clear knowledge that the moment was hers, and that no man, no letter, no card table, no blizzard, would ever take it from her again. She turned. Edmund was in the doorway of his study. He had come out at the sound of voices. He stood in his shirt sleeves, the way he had stood 2 years ago, although there was no glass in his hand now, and no folded letter on the desk. Behind him, he had grown thin. There was gray at his temples that had not been there. He looked. Lavinia saw with the small, distant clarity of a woman who has stopped being afraid of him, like a man who had been sleeping badly for a long time, and had only just understood in this moment why. He did not speak at first. He looked at her in the dark green dress. He looked at the boy on her shoulder, who was looking back at him with the calm, grave gaze of a child who had been told, by his nurse and by the old woman at the foot of the stair, that there was a man in this house whom his mother would deal with, and that he, the boy, was not to be afraid of the man. Edmund looked, last, at Endelion behind her. Endelion stepped forward. Mr. Hallowell stepped forward with her. Mr. Hallowell carried a small leather folder. "Lord Ashcombe," Mr. Hallowell said quietly, "forgive the intrusion. My name is Hallowell of Lincoln's Inn. I have the honor to present Her Excellency, the Marchioness of Vaux du Tejo, of the House of Vaux of Lisbon, and Her Ladyship the Marchioness du Vale du Cedro, who is, by the courtesy of His Most Faithful Majesty of Portugal, and the formal recognition of His Majesty's government here in London as of February of this year, your wife, my lord. Madam, this is your husband, my lord. This is your wife." The papers are in this folder. They are, my lord, in order. Edmund stared at him. He stared at him for a long moment. Then, very slowly, his eyes went back to Lavinia. Lavinia, he said. It was not a question. It was not an apology. It was only her name in his mouth for the first time in 2 years. My lord, Lavinia said. She did not lower her voice. She did not raise it. She spoke at the pitch a marchioness speaks at when she has come a long way to say a small thing. I left a child in this house, she said. I have come to collect him. I have collected him. Mr. Hallowell will speak with you in your study this afternoon about the small matter of how this house will be run from this hour forward. You will find his terms generous. They are more generous than you deserve. They are as generous as they are because the boy on my shoulder is your son, my lord, and I do not wish him to grow up under a father who has been ruined, only under a father who has been corrected. Do you understand the difference? Edmund looked at her. He understood the difference. He bowed his head. He did not speak. He had nothing to say that was equal to the dark green dress, the gold chain, the boy on her shoulder, the old woman with the second boy on her arm, the small dry solicitor with the folder. Lavinia did not wait for him to find a sentence. She turned. She walked with her son past the cold fireplace, past the portrait of the late Ashcombe in his hunting coat, past the long narrow tables. She did not look at the kitchen door at the end of the gallery. She did not need to. She had left through that door once, in a thin gray shawl, in a black wind, in a pair of borrowed boots, and she had come back through the front, and that was the only fact she had any further use for. Mrs. Quirk was waiting at the foot of the stair. Lavinia paused. Mrs. Quirk, my lady, the south sitting room, the fire. It has been lit since dawn, my lady. There is tea. There is bread. There is, my lady, a small green leather book on the writing desk by the window. Lavinia smiled. It was the first time she had smiled inside Ashcombe Hall in 3 years. Thank you, Mrs. Quirk, she said. We will take the tea. All of us, including in due course Mrs. Pengilly. The little master has had his mother. He may now also have his nurse. Yes, my lady. She walked, with her son in her arms and her cousin behind her, and the boy's nurse a respectful 3 paces back, into the south sitting room she had been allowed 3 years ago, and which now, by every paper in Mr. Hallowell's folder, was hers in fact as it had been hers in feeling. And she sat down by the fire, and she set her son on her knee, and outside in the long gallery, Lord Edmund Ashcombe stood in his shirt sleeves, and watched his wife close a door behind her that he was not, by the terms of the folder, going to be permitted to open again without knocking. He stood for a long time. He would stand in that gallery, in one form or another, for the rest of his life. If her story moved you, my loves, if you walked every verst of that road with her, if you cheered when she came through the front door with the boy in her arms, please tap that subscribe button and ring the bell, because there are more women like Lavinia waiting on this channel to be heard, and I will keep telling their stories as long as you keep coming back for them. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for staying with her to the end. I will see you in the next one. The summer at Ashcombe Hall was the kindest summer the village remembered. That was what Mr. Trudell said, on the steps of the small parish school in June, to anyone who would listen. The rain came when it was needed. The hay went up dry. The new schoolroom, which had been built by Whitson on the south side of the church with money out of Lavinia's Portuguese income and no fanfare at all, opened with 24 children inside, and Mr. Trudell's eldest, home from Cambridge for the long vacation, helping his father teach the smaller ones their letters. The boy at the great house grew. He was called, by the village, the little master still, but he had a name now that the village had been given permission to use. Bramwell, Branscombe, Polkinghorne, Ashcombe. The 4 names rolled together like 4 small bells. The village called him Master Bram when his nurse was within hearing, and the green-eyed boy when she was not, because his eyes, the village had decided by midsummer, had gone the color of the sea on a quiet day. And that was not an Ashcombe color. That was a Polkinghorne color. The village did not say so to his lordship. His lordship was in the east wing. He had moved there in May. He had moved there because Mr. Hallowell had been very clear, on the afternoon of the homecoming, that the south wing, the central rooms, the library, the chapel, the home farm, the south pasture, the village school, the lambing accounts, the dairy, and the management of the estate were the Marchioness's province from that hour forward, and that the east wing was his lordship's. The east wing had 9 rooms. It had a study, a small library of its own, a bedroom, a dressing room, 2 parlours that his lordship had not yet found a use for, and a private staircase to a private door that opened on the stable yard. It also had its own bell. The bell rang into the housekeeper's room when his lordship wanted breakfast, or a fire built up, or his post brought. The bell did not ring into Lavinia's wing. Lavinia had ordered the wire cut on the second day. Mrs. Quirk had cut it herself, in the housekeeper's room with a pair of garden shears, and had not made a face about it. Edmund had asked, in the third week, whether he might dine in the south wing. Mr. Hallowell, by letter from London, had replied for Lavinia. His lordship was welcome to dine in the central dining room, with the family, on the first Sunday of each month, at his option, provided his lordship had been sober since the Thursday previous. His lordship had not yet taken up the option. His lordship had, instead, ridden out. He rode every morning at 6. He rode alone. He rode the south pasture, and the home farm, and the lambing fields, and the 4 miles of new hedging that had been laid in April, by men he had not hired. He rode slowly. He rode the way a man rides who is reading. For the first time in his life, the country he has owned since he was 24. He was 34 now. He had grown thinner in the spring. He had begun by midsummer to bow to Mr. Bullen on the lane in the mornings. Mr. Bullen, who had been steward of Ashcombe Hall for 31 years, and had not been bowed to by an Ashcombe in his life, had not known, the first morning, what to do. He had decided by the second morning to bow back. Lavinia did not ride, she walked. She walked in the south garden in the early mornings with Bram on her hip, and she walked in the home farm in the afternoons with Bram on her hand, and she walked in the long gallery in the evenings with Bram asleep against her shoulder. She wore, most days, a plain dark green wool dress and her mother's gold chain. She did not need the dress to be more than it was. She had been Lady Ashcombe in silk, and she had been a marchioness in wool, and she had learned, in 2 years on the Rua das Flores, that a woman who has been thrown into the snow in a thin gray shawl is not made larger by silk afterwards. She is made larger by walking. She walked. Endelian stayed through the summer. She stayed in a south-facing bedroom that overlooked the rose garden, and she sat most afternoons on the small stone bench by the sundial, with a Portuguese newspaper in her lap, and the small green parrot Caetano on a stand beside her. She had brought the parrot from Lisbon because Bram had cried for him on the second night at Ashcombe. The parrot had not minded the journey. He had learned, by July, 3 new words of Devon English, all of them the names of the cook's puddings. Endelian would go back in September. She had said so, kindly, on a Sunday in July, while the parrot ate cake on her finger. Lisbon needed her. The estate in Sintra needed her. Her son's ship was due in from the Brazils in October, and he had not seen his mother in a year. She would go. She would come back every spring. She would write every Wednesday. She would expect, every Wednesday, a letter in return. Lavinia had said yes to all of it without speaking. On the last evening of August, she sat with Endelian on the stone bench by the sundial. Bram was asleep upstairs. The parrot was on its stand. The first cool of the evening was coming up off the south pasture, and the moor wind, which had been black on a March morning 2.5 years ago, was only a small, soft west wind tonight, the kind that smelled of cut hay. Endelian said, "Child." "Yes, Avo." "You have not asked me in 3 months the question I have been waiting for you to ask." "I know." "Will you ask it tonight?" Lavinia was quiet for a moment. She looked across the south pasture. There was a single light in the east wing of the house. Edmund had begun in July to read at night. Mrs. Quirk had remarked it. He had asked the library, by a written note slid under Mrs. Quirk's door, for a copy of Cowper. Mrs. Quirk had taken him a copy of Cowper. He had asked, in a second note a week later, for the small green primer of French verbs that had been Lavinia's mother's. Mrs. Quirk had not taken him that. Mrs. Quirk had not answered the second note. Lavinia had not been told about either note for a month, because Mrs. Quirk had a sense of timing that an old housekeeper earns over 41 years. "Will I divorce him?" Lavinia said quietly. "Yes." "No." Endelian turned her head. "No, child, no, Avo. Not because I forgive him. I do not forgive him. I will not, I think, ever forgive him in the simple sense of the word. But Bram is his son. I have decided on the long walks of this summer that I will not be the person who takes a father from a child, even a father like that. I will not let Edmund near Bram unsupervised. I will not let Edmund have any decision about Bram's schooling, or his name, or his marriage when he is grown. I have written all of that into the papers Mr. Hallowell drew up in April. But I will not divorce him. I will let him sit in the east wing, and ride out in the mornings and read his Cowper, and be a man who is required, by the fact of his name, to look at the small, careful country he nearly lost. He will be his own punishment, Avo. I do not need to add to it, and Bram will know, when he is old enough to ask, that his mother did not strike the second blow." Endelian was quiet for a long moment. She said, "Child, that is more than I would have done. I know. It is the right answer. I know." Endelian reached, and she took Lavinia's hand on the bench. They sat for a long time without speaking. The light in the east wing went out at last around 10. The cook's pudding name came once from the parrot. Bram, somewhere upstairs, did not cry. If her story moved you, my loves, if you walked every step of that road with her, if you wept when she walked through the front door with her son in her arms, please tap that subscribe button and ring the bell. There are more women like Lavinia waiting on this channel to be heard. Some of them have walked further than she did. Some of them are still walking. I will keep telling their stories as long as you keep coming back for them. And I want to ask you something before you go. Have you ever been pushed out of a door that should have stayed open? Have you ever had to walk back to it on your own terms? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for staying with Lavinia to the end. I will see you in the next one.